Good morning, everybody, online and also in our room here in Muscular Dystrophy Ireland in Dublin. We're really thrilled today to be bringing people together for our community gathering for people with the condition of Charcot-Marie-Tooth and people connected with the condition. So it's fantastic. Welcome everybody online and in person. We have a lovely line up today, and we hope that you will get a lot from it. The main objective of these community gatherings is to encourage people to come together as a community and to connect with one another, learn together and support one another. So we really hope that you will get something from today like that. This is the second of our 4 community gatherings that we've organised for this between now and Christmas, and we will next week be having a community gathering for people with myotonic dystrophy, and then we will in November have one for people with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. But back to today, welcome everybody. October is Charcot-Marie-Tooth Awareness Month in the UK, so it's very timely that we're also having this event in the month of October. Our first speaker will be Rebekah Knight, who introduced herself a short while ago. We're really thrilled to have Rebekah join us, and Rebekah will tell us all about herself, so I won't say too much, but I will just say that she was diagnosed with CMT 1A, the most common type of CMT, type 1, in 2011. And Rebekah has created a fantastic exercise video series for CMT Association in the United States, and they have very kindly given us permission to share that resource with people, and we will make that available on our website as well, so that you can access it yourselves. I will invite Rebekah to, rather than me speaking too much about Rebekah, I'll invite Rebekah to speak about herself. And thank you very much, Rebekah, and welcome from South Wales.
Hello there. So, as Maeve said, I'm Rebekah Knight. I'm a physio with CMT, which I always thought was really unusual, but it sounds like you've got other physios with CMT as well, which is really cool to know. Here it is. As I said, I'm Rebekah Knight. I've got a postgrad diploma in sport and exercise physiotherapy, and I graduated from physio in 2013 from Cardiff. Now the next slide, please. I had a very similar situation to a lot of people with CMT, in that when I was growing up, I just never felt like I was a very sporty, active person, really. I just didn't relate to it. I didn't get on well in PE, in school especially. I always found things really hard, but never really understood why. I think when I was little, my mother might have taken me to the doctors and said that I couldn't jump. And I think the response that she got was, well, maybe she doesn't want to jump. And that's about as far as that ever went. So I grew up mainly thinking that I was clumsy and potentially a bit lazy as well. And I just thought, well, do you know what? Sport isn't really for me, but I am quite academic. So I concentrated on that. And then I was even having surgeries as a teenager for some of the foot problems I was having, mainly because in my school, they made school shoes rather than trainers compulsory. And because of the shape of my feet, there wasn't many shoes that I could really fit into. So I was having surgery as a teenager. And even then, the surgeons were saying, you know, oh, it's strange that you'd have this problem at your age. But that's about as far as my curiosity went. So I never really knew anything more than that for a really long time. When I was in hospital having surgery, I noticed that the physios seemed to be the happiest people in the hospital. So I decided like I could probably do that. And I started studying physiotherapy then in 2010. Quite quickly though, what I found was that actually there are words for the way that my feet look. And when we started doing things like gait analysis, I realized that actually the way that I walk isn't really normal. And also a few other things flagged up in terms of not having reflexes and having patchy sensation in my feet as well, which I hadn't actually even noticed until then. And it was at that point then that a lecturer said to me, like, oh, you might want to get that checked out. So I did. And then I got diagnosed with CMT then towards the end of my first year at university. I did have a couple of months where I had a bit of a crisis, as you do, where I thought like, oh, I don't know whether to continue studying physio, because it might not be something that I can do forever. I was working really hard at it, but I decided in the end that I would probably be able to do it that year, and then I'll see what happens next year. And then I've done that 10 times so far, and it's still going quite well. So what I've tried to do, though, is to use my experience as a physio to try and help to promote exercise to other people with CMT, because that actually formed a critical part of how I've managed it all these years. Can we have the next slide, please? So as I said, sort of typical, really poor experiences of exercise originally. I think the only sport I ever really found not terrible was swimming to start with. But then when I got diagnosed with CMT and then going through the process of studying physio as well, it just kind of made sense to me and added up that I was going to need to manage this with exercise. And I thought it made sense to try and get stronger. So what I did was I initially started going to the gym, and I would go really early in the morning when there was minimal witnesses, because I didn't really want people to see me wobbling all over the place. I couldn't really lunge without falling over at the time. But I started off with a little bit of strength training and spin classes. And then once I'd been doing that for a little while and was getting into a routine with it, I thought, as ridiculous as it sounded at the time, I thought, well, do you know what? I actually really want to get properly strong. And I decided that I wanted to be able to lift with a bar and try and lift really heavy. So I ended up having a personal trainer for 18 months then, where I was able to learn the basics of squatting and deadlifting, which I found really, really helpful. It took me so much longer than it normally takes people to be able to do anything remotely resembling a squat, but after years and years of practice now, it's not too bad. It's all right. I think deadlifts I've always found a bit easier, but I did manage to get myself reasonably strong during that time. Over the years then, I then had a baby, and he's got CMT as well. And then when I was starting to get back into it, at some point, I hurt my ankle in work, and it was my peroneal tendon, which we know that we all tend to have trouble with. And it wasn't really healing, and it wasn't coping with what I was doing in the gym either. So I was trying to think of something else that I could do that was going to not bother my ankle, but enable me to stay active, because by that point I was already sold on the benefits of being active and exercising. And I came across rowing kind of by accident. I saw some footage of it on TV, I think, at some point, and I was watching it and I thought, you know what, that's a sitting down deadlift, and I'm quite good at deadlifts. So I joined my local rowing club and started to get involved there. It was quite quickly identified that even though I'm quite small for a rower, like rowers usually are like great big, tall, kind of muscular build, heavy people. And I was this like reasonably short, like woman. But I was strong for my size, and that was identified quite early. So I think one of the coaches got a bit excited about that. And it was from all those years of lifting, I guess. So I started on the GB Para Rowing Talent ID program at that time. Mainly because I wanted to be less rubbish at it quicker. It was the first time really I'd ever experienced anyone sort of calling me a natural at anything sporty, because until then there were certain things that I could do, but it was not natural. Like it took months and months and months and months of work. So I think to start this sport and then have people identify quite early that there was something about it that was really suiting me, I found really exciting. So I started that program. And despite all of it not being the right size and everything, I ended up progressing onto their talent performance program for a few months as well. And it wasn't until then, I think, they were obsessed with me trying to gain weight and to get bigger, and it doesn't work for my body. I couldn't do it. So I decided that I'd got out of the program what I needed to. And now I row at Llandaff, which is in Cardiff, which is where I'm from, if you spot the slightly Welsh accent. And I did stay in touch with Welsh rowing. And actually then I ended up the summer this year, I competed in the Home International Regatta in Carrick-on-Shannon. And I rowed for Wales there against a rower from England. So I just think that, you know, it's just sort of demonstrate this. And what I tend to do is I do post a lot of what I train online, Mainly because when I was first diagnosed and I was looking for information and searching through all the hashtags and everything, I found that it was quite a lot of people saying things like, oh, well, I can't do this and I can't do that. And I think that people have every right to talk about that sort of stuff. But for me, it made me panic as someone who'd newly been diagnosed. And it made me really stress about it. And I wanted to create a space that showed people what you might actually be able to do and what can be achieved, and that exercise, even though it hasn't always felt like it had a space for me, it actually does. But it can often be a matter of trying to find the right thing for you. So that's sort of my journey with the whole thing, really. And all throughout that time then, reasonably early on, I made the series of videos for CMT Association, and then more recently I made some for CMT UK as well. Yeah, can we have the next slide? So I thought, in terms of one of the other things that I did during that time was I set up these health and wellness events for CMT UK, where I spent a period of time traveling around the UK trying to help to inform people with CMT about the ways that they can manage the condition better themselves that don't necessarily involve surgery. There is a time and a place for surgery, but I really wanted it to be focusing on kind of lifestyle and wellness and exercise mainly. And you'd be surprised, everyone thinks that their questions are going to be really unusual and specific, but actually I found that a lot of the same themes kept coming up. I think one of the major ones was the fact that doctors will quite often just offhand say things like, oh yeah, we'll exercise, but just don't overdo it, don't do too much. And I think I've had lots of talks with doctors about this, because I think that they're often just saying it as a bit of a throwaway comment. But in the context of CMT, where you've got people who probably have never really got on that well with exercise, and also in the context of a condition where, you know, there was a time where people were being told that overwork weakness was going to be a problem. So I think in that context, I think saying things like don't overdo it and warning people more than encouraging them was putting people off and frightening them, especially when it comes to things like delayed onset of muscle soreness, which is DOMS. So it's really normal after exercise to ache a bit the next couple of days. It can even last, you know, it can last up to a week really. And I think that a lot of the time with CMT, because a lot of people typically aren't very active, I don't know whether we tend to get DOMS quite severely or like quite easily. And the problem then is that people often feel that sort of aching in their muscles, and they start to panic that they're causing damage. And then it can often lead to them not ending up doing anything. Or they end up in these boom bust cycles where you might get really motivated and try to exercise for a little bit, but then ache so bad that you stop until it stops aching, and then you try again. But because you never get past that initial bit of aching, you're just kind of going around in a circle with it. The thing is with this muscle soreness is that it's totally normal and harmless, but the only way out of it is kind of through it. It's always worse for those first couple of weeks, but if you just hang in there and modify your exercises a little bit, then quite often it will settle down. And for example, nowadays, I very rarely get delayed onset of muscle soreness. I very rarely ache, but there was a time where I would ache for a full week and I would be struggling to sit down for days and days and days after going to the gym. Yeah, so in terms of how delayed is delayed in DOMS, usually it is 2 or 3 days. It's, you know, anywhere from 24 to 48 hours onwards usually. The other thing that I find is a common problem is lack of confidence generally. I think, you know, if you're someone who has never really had good experiences in PE in school, or if you're someone who's never really found a sport that suits you, or if you're someone who continuously was going to be falling over and finding things hard, then it's really easy to feel like you don't really know what you're doing when you go to the gym, and just find it quite intimidating. And I certainly did when I started, hence going in the first thing in the morning, and also then needing a PT for a good period of time. So I think that's also something to address as well, that can be a common barrier. We can have next slide. In terms of if people are looking for a starting point, if they're brand new to any kind of exercise, and they're just sort of wanting to get into it a little bit, this is where the videos that I made come in really. The ones that I made for the CMT Association in the States, they're more kind of physical therapy type videos. So they are quite gentle. It's tricky with a condition like CMT. It's so widely variable that you're never going to get something that suits everyone. But I did try and pick exercises that most people that I meet tend to be able to do. And there's a whole series of them. So there's some for like upper limb, and there's some for lower limb, and there's some core ones, and there's one about stretches, and I think there's one for hand and finger strengthening as well. So they can be a really nice place to start, and I did have nice feedback from those as well. But then also, I think it was 2020, I think it was during all the lockdowns at some point or another, that all seems to blend into one now. I did a series of kind of home exercise videos for the CMT UK, because they were doing it like an activity challenge at the time. So those ones are kind of more, they're sort of more, they might get your heart rate up a little bit more and be a little bit more challenging. But even still, I really made them, I tried to make them AFO friendly, and I tried to explain lots of modifications for ways that you can change the exercise to suit you as well, just to get people started. Because I think the other thing with CMT is that because it's a chronic progressive condition, and it doesn't have kind of this acute onset of problems a lot of the time, and sometimes people never get to meet a physio until they're falling over quite late on, and I just thought that was such a shame. And I knew that, well, I just felt that if we could get people moving, get them active sooner, then maybe they wouldn't get to a point where they were starting from literally square one by the time they're falling over. So that was my thinking in terms of working with the charities, to try and do something proactive that was going to help people get going in the first place. You can have the next slide. The other thing that I used to talk about a lot in the health and wellness events was how to make the most out of your physio appointments, because one of the really common complaints that I hear about from people is that they wait for months for an appointment, and then they go to their appointment and they tell the physio that they've got CMT, and they get met with the most blank look, while the physio kind of racks their brains and tries to think, have I ever heard of that before? Sometimes you get them sort of start to mutter a bit about like Charcot foot, which isn't the same thing, but quite often they haven't heard of it. And the thing is I do lots of work around trying to raise awareness amongst healthcare professionals, but I think it's also important to speak to the patients and explain, actually, well, what could you do to still get the most out of your appointment, even if your physio hasn't heard of CMT? Because realistically, there are always going to be rare conditions that they won't have heard of. Like I'm a physio, day to day, I know that there are going to be things that I won't have heard of. But what I know that I and other physios do have is the skills to still help people, as long as we have a rough understanding of what it is and how it's presenting. And also they would have the ability to go away and learn about it from good sources, and know where to look for that sort of information. So I'm working on it from their end. And then I think from patient end, then it's a matter of really understanding the language that physios use, and how it all kind of works to get the most out of it. So one thing that we get a lot of focus on in our training is things like problem lists. So I think showing up to an appointment and saying like, I've got CMT, like, what are we going to do about it? Can leave it quite open if you've got a healthcare professional who doesn't totally understand the CMT. If you can roughly tell them just quickly, like it's a peripheral neuropathy, they'll understand what that means. And if you tell them that it affects the motor and sensory nerves, mainly usually below the knees and elbows, and even better than that, if you can give them a little list of ways that it's affecting you specifically, because it does vary so much person to person anyway, then that's even better. So if you can go in there and say like, well, I've got CMT, which if you don't know is this genetic peripheral neuropathy. And in me, it means that I have a really hard time with my balance, and that makes it hard to get up and down the stairs. And if you can tell them something like that, that immediately gives them something really useful to work from, and they don't even need to 100% understand CMT to still be able to help you in that situation. It might be something like you could say, well, I'm really struggling with walking on uneven surfaces, or it might be, getting off the floor and things like that, or, I'm having lots of falls. If you can, the more specific you are about the specific symptoms that you're having and then how they're affecting your day-to-day function, that gets you a long way and will save you loads and loads of time. Because as you know, like these hospital appointments that you get are usually not as long as you'd like them to be. And I think the less time we can waste, the better. So if you can go in there with quite a specific idea of the things that you want to work on, then it really helps to save time. And actually, it also helps you to get the most out of the appointment. So I think the worst thing is leaving it and thinking like, well, that was a bit pointless. So it's trying to avoid that happening, really. The other thing that physios love is goal setting. So if you can say like, you know, I'd really like to be able to walk up the stairs in one go, or I'd really like to be able to, you know, walk around the lake near where I live or something. If there's something specific that's meaningful to you that you're thinking like, I would love to be able to achieve that, then it's worth mentioning that as well, because they can include that into your plan then. Yeah, I think with CMT, there are going to be certain limitations, you know, like for me, I don't think that a goal of mine will ever be to run a marathon because I can't even run 5K. I wouldn't run down the road. So I think as long as they're specific, they're measurable, and they are realistic as well, then again, it helps to get you both speaking the same language and to be on the same page. And I think going into your appointment, I know how frustrating it is personally to go and then have to explain what CMT is to them. But I think if you just allow them that little bit of grace and just be willing to educate them a little bit. So I know that like a lot of the charities now will they've got information sheets that you can give them, which will explain a bit about what CMT is and how it presents. That's really helpful. Or even just going in there with the mindset of being willing to tell them what CMT is and how it affects you, get you a long way. Whereas if you go in and you're kind of like, oh, you haven't heard of it. Oh, here we go, this appointment's going to be pointless. I like to tell people that isn't necessarily the case. So we are human physios. I know a lot about CMT, and I do think that helps when treating people with CMT, but I do have massive amounts of faith in my colleagues who probably haven't heard of it. In the same way that I sometimes deal with conditions that I haven't heard of, but we still have the skills to do that, but it just means that we have to work together as a team a little bit more. Do you have the next slide, please? So really, for me, I think the main thing that we want to think about is how we can balance managing the symptoms of CMT with leading an active lifestyle. Because the trouble is with CMT is when you have things like fatigue and pain and you get cramps and things anyway, in the short term, you may have a bit of an increase in being tired and being sore and aching. So it's about balancing that and getting it right, really, to make sure that you're able to keep going with it, which is the main thing. And it will vary a bit person to person. So one person's exercise program won't be the same as the next person's because it totally depends on exactly where you are. So if we have the next slide, I had a couple of suggestions that I thought would be good sort of general ideas to work on. So the first thing is starting small, but aiming high. So when I say start small, I don't mean, you know, do it so lightly that it doesn't really do anything. I think starting at a level where you're reasonably confident that you're going to be able to get through it and not suffer too badly afterwards is really useful. But the idea with exercise really is that each week you want to try and make it slightly harder than the week before. And it should be progressive. So if you're going to go and lift weights, for example, you wouldn't do the same weight every week forever. So it's a matter of starting at a level that you're reasonably confident that you can achieve, getting enough recovery in between, but then each week you're trying to either increase the reps or the amount of sets you're doing, which is the amount of times you're doing those reps, or the amount of weight that you're doing. But what you don't do is increase all of those things at the same time. And I think that it's trying to get past this mentality that I think me and a lot of other people have grown up with, where you think like, oh, well, I don't exercise, it's not for me. Because you'd be surprised. Hang in there. The idea is to build slowly. And then I've got a big word in here, understanding periodization. And if you don't know about periodization, all that really means is that if you were to go and do exercise and you just decided to increase it every week forever, then you do eventually get to a point where you're either going to get injured or you just can't do anymore. So if I was going to be deadlifting, I'll either hurt myself or I just can't physically lift anymore. What tends to work better is actually if you can increase it a bit for a few weeks, and then you might have a week where you back off and you do it really light and just do it for technique and just sort of get through that week and have a bit of a recovery week. And then the idea is that you can start the next block on maybe what you did on week 2 of the first block. And then you can increase it a few times in a row again, and then back off for a week again and have a recovery week. It's trying to add in those bits of coming down and have a bit of recovery before your body forces you to. Because if you don't artificially put those in, then at some point or another, you'll find that your body does it. So I think that making it quite steady, it slows down that sort of rapid increase a bit. And it might mean that you're only increasing your weight by, it might be 1 kilo a month. And that would be absolutely fine, because the important thing is that's maintainable. Whereas if you were to try and increase it every week and just keep going, then you tend to find that you run into more trouble then. So it's just about making it progressive, but planning it a bit longer term for most people. And I do generally find that that process works well. The other thing then is to get stronger at moving differently. So I think the one mistake that I do sometimes see physios making is that they look at the way that you walk and the way that you move, and they think, right, your ankles are weak, we need to try and strengthen them. And I do think there is some value in that. However, for me, on a day-to-day basis, for myself and with patients, what I tend to focus on mainly is to get stronger at moving differently. So, you know, with CMT, once the nerve supply isn't really working for that muscle anymore, it's not there. So what we need to do is to be able to compensate for it better. You know, I see a lot of people who are like being told to do loads of calf raises and things, which is all very well and good. But I think that we should also be focusing on your quads, glutes, and hamstrings, which actually aren't affected. So that actually, even if you walk differently, you could still be doing that better. So it's about not trying to match it to someone who doesn't have CMT, but just trying to get it to a point where it's working better for you. The other thing is to find something you enjoy. And I think for me, what I found is that that was things that weren't mainstream kind of activities. You know, rowing wouldn't have even been on my radar growing up. But once you start getting out there and looking for other things, be surprised. I remember, well, I'm one of the admins of the CMT Athletes Facebook group. And we have people doing all sorts of things on there. You know, some of them do triathlon, but then some of them do bowling, some of them do gardening. We've got a real mix of all sorts of things. So it's a matter of thinking outside the box sometimes. You know, if you're like me and you grew up in a school where your options were hockey or netball, then it's about trying to think about other options. So like my son is 5 and he has CMT as well. At the moment, he's not too phased, even though I can see that he's struggling with it. And he still quite enjoys PE at the minute, which I really hope continues. But what I'm being conscious to do at the moment, while he's still small especially, is to expose him to other sports that he probably wouldn't get exposure to in school. Just so he has the opportunity to try something that he might be good at and that might suit him a little bit better. So, you know, he loves to be on a balance bike. And I've had him doing horse riding lessons, and we do swimming. So I try and do things like that, which don't involve so much running and jumping, just so that he has a bit more variety in experiences in sport. So I know that when I was growing up, most of my experiences in sport were pretty bad. And there's also considering para categories. So, you know, I think if you'd gone back to me when I was in comprehensive school and told me that I'd be rowing for Wales, I'd have laughed right in your face. But you'd be surprised. We need majorly more representation of people taking part in para sport. And it is there. It just, I think it sometimes isn't too well known about, or people, they're not sure if they would be classified in the right categories and things. But honestly, there are loads and loads and loads of options out there. So it's about going out there and looking for them and seeing what suits you. You know, I would never be competitive as an able-bodied rower because I'm not. But in a para category, I actually have, you know, somewhat of a shot. I'm not too far off. So it's having to think about that really, and being aware that that sort of stuff is out there. Have the next slide, please. So I'm a physiotherapist in Spire in Cardiff. That's not meant to be a semicolon, it's meant to be an @ sign. But that's my email address if you do have any questions, or if you want to get in touch with me, you can. I also do physiotherapy virtually, so I have been seeing some patients online if they're needing a bit of like more personal one-to-one help with getting started with exercise. Or critically, I think with CMT, It's if you are exercising and you get injured, it's about managing it around that and trying not to have too much time off. Because what we don't want to do is to spend long periods of time getting weaker and losing our fitness. We want to try and maintain mobility and strength as much as we can. And I'm just a firm believer that you can train around almost anything. So that's what I try and do with people. So my website's there, my email address is there, if you need to get in touch with me for any reason. Are there any questions?
Can I just say something today? Just before I stop sharing my screen, I'm just going to bring up so the videos that Rebekah made reference to there around that's been with CMT UK. We've put them on our website, so I just want to signpost people to where they are. Let me just see if I can share this just while we're here today.
It's USA, CMT Association USA.
How can I go to that one? Okay, so yeah, when you go on to, if you just go onto our website, mdi.ie, it'll take you to the home page. Now, there's just a bit of an IT glitch. We actually are moving website in the next week. So when you go on, you will see it is actually featured on the home screen. But I would say don't click into that one, just in case, just to confuse people. If you can go over to the news tab, and if you click on that, it will take you here. So in this, it's got the link for the CMT exercise video that was done through the USA one. And then when you click on that, you'll see that they're all there. So that's kind of what Rebekah was just mentioning. You know, they're broken down into ankle balance, proprioception, lower leg, hands and fingers, stretching. So just to let you know that they are all on that. So once you go into our homepage, click on news and it'll take you to that website. So thank you. Stop sharing my screen here.
Rebekah, before we go to questions, just to thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your experience, and your very proactive approach to exercise and life. It's really interesting to hear all you've shared. So we would like to invite people to ask questions or indeed to share experiences they're comfortable with. And again, because we're doing this in a pausing way to make sure that everybody is heard, we'd like to start again with the people online to bring them into the room. And then following that, we will go to people in the room. And then following that again, we will see, are there any extra questions coming up on chat for people who prefer to write their question into the chat function on Zoom. So thanks a million, Rebekah. So we will invite people on Zoom, first of all, if anybody would like to put up their hand to show that they might have a question or indeed a comment. We give it a little time.
Yeah.
Can't find the digital raise hand. Can I raise a real hand?
Go ahead,
Okay, if I
Catherine.
go. Hi. Just a quick question. I like to dance. I salsa dance, but one of my problems, I have CMT 1A. I can't dance in heels anymore. I can't feel the soles of my feet. I dance in trainers or socks. Is there a route back? Like, is there a way I can train myself to be able to dance in heels? I almost want to take them off and throw them across the room when I start because my balance is so awful and I just feel like I can't dance anymore. Do I live with it and get different shoes, or do I keep trying? Can't work it out if I just need to push myself harder or if I need to move into a phase of acceptance.
Wow. Is it a balance problem or is it hurting?
Misbalance. It doesn't hurt. Can't really feel my feet, so nothing hurts.
Yeah.
They're relatively low. I don't have high dance heels. I got lower ones. It's just balance. I can't spin.
Does it make any difference if the heel is a wider kind of block sort of heel rather than a narrow?
that's where I'm at with the ones I'm persevering with. So yeah, I've tried a wider one. So
Yeah,
I'm
it's
just
really difficult. It is tough, and I think that you have options. Like you can always do balance exercises and see if that helps matters. I think with dance, you're going to need to incorporate balance exercises that do involve looking a different direction a lot of the time. So it'll, rather than just standing on one leg, it's going to be things like trying to stand on one leg, but also look over your shoulder, both sides, because you're going to need to be able to balance whilst your head is turning, I'm imagining. So that'll be an important thing. So you can always do things like that. There's a few different balance exercises that you can try to see if that can be improved. But I also think that, you know, sometimes one thing that comes up is that people talk about themselves like fighting CMT, and it all just sounds a bit aggressive to me. Whereas I like to think of it more like, you know, we're working with it rather than against it sometimes. So, you know, you might find it with balance exercises that the situation gets a bit easier. But then I also think partly, you know, I don't think there's any defeat that's happened if you actually need to change your shoes, if it means you get to keep dancing. So like there are some ways that I make adaptations, and it's not that I'm giving up or that CMT's got the better of me. It's just that I'm adapting it so I can do it better, and that I'm held back less, and that I can keep up with people more. So, you know, it's things like, I think when I first started wearing an AFO, I was just a bit like, I don't know if it's just going to make my leg weaker because then I'm not using my muscles. But then I thought, well, actually, it'll help me walk further, and I'll keep up with people better, and I can walk faster and fall over less. So it's always a matter of like balancing it up. And I think that we don't need to be afraid of adapting and changing things. And it's not like a personal failure if you do need to do that either. It's just part of having a disability. And I just think that if we can reframe how we think about that, then it starts to feel a bit more positive. You know, so like with rowing, sometimes I use a hand grip aid. And yeah, you know, that might mean that maybe my hands isn't getting as good a workout, but actually the rest of my body is infinitely better. And I use aids to be able to hold on to a barbell to do deadlifts, because if I didn't do that, then I'd only deadlift maybe 30 kilos, whereas with hand grips, I can do 100 kilos. So I think that it's about getting that balance right. You know, I would always be doing balance exercises, but I also wouldn't sort of be too hard on yourself if you do find that you need to adapt things a bit. If it means that you get to keep doing the things that you like and to be able to keep up with people better and to have a better time doing it.
Thank you.
Oh yes, so FS Corgi.
Yeah,
Somebody,
yeah. Sorry, I should change my name. Thanks. Thank you, Rebekah. That was really inspiring to hear all the things that you've managed to do, but also in your work as a physiotherapist. So just going back to the thing, what you mentioned about how, you know, how doctors or other physios sort of say things like, you know, you can exercise, but don't overdo it. You know, you could harm. You know, my son, who's 12, when he saw a pediatric physiotherapist in Cape Town earlier this year, I mean, she also pointed out a few things that she was like, don't ever do this with him, you know, which really frightened me, because I immediately started to think of things like PE at school. And you know, even although we can tell the PE teacher or tell the school that, you know, this is the condition he has and you have to be careful. I mean, they don't know, they've never heard of it. And so it's also about educating them. And I'm just always anxious about that, you know. Will they still make him run long distances, which he really absolutely cannot do? And, you know, as a 12-year-old, it's really hard for him to say, look, I can't do this, because he's going to be, and it's happened before where, you know, the teacher said, no, you're just being lazy, you know. So I find that really difficult to know how to manage. And so, yeah, any tips that anything that you've experienced with your patients, especially with children, because he does have, like I just mentioned this, that he does have pain in his calves. He says that the calves feel like they're on fire. And, you know, I'm conscious that when he's having those pains, we probably shouldn't be pushing him physically to be exercising, but it comes and goes. And, you know, so yeah, just some thoughts on how to manage this situation.
I think that what you might find really helpful actually is going to be to have a proper meeting with the school. that you can explain it to them better. Because the way that I've dealt with it with my son in school is that I've said, like, you know, there's nothing you can do with CMT that's going to speed it up or slow it down. So we don't need to worry about, like, it's not like even if he did run, that it would make CMT worse. It does mean that he's more likely to get injured. And we don't want to be injured too much, because for us to have a period of time of prolonged rest and reduced mobility is probably going to have a more detrimental impact than it would to someone who's able-bodied. But I think it's got to come down to better education of the teachers in schools. And I know that when I was little, they thought I was just clumsy and lazy. And I had a teacher call me Humpty Dumpty, and like, they're just not very good with it sometimes. But what they really need to be encouraged to do is, rather than him sit out of things, is to give him something alternative to do. So, you know, can they get him on a bike instead of running, you know, like, or if currently he can run and wants to run, there's no harm in letting him do it if he feels up to it. But if he doesn't, it's really about the way that they can make it accessible, would be not by excluding him and sort of singling him out. But what often helps is giving him something alternative to do and letting a friend do it with him as well. So if they can give him something else, but then also let him have a friend or two to join him on that, then he's not kind of the odd one out excluded, especially at that sort of age as well. I think that can be quite isolating, and it doesn't, like, what I'm all about is building positive early experiences of sport. So, you know, I think I know that I found PE and school life really, really hard. So I think even like as soon as I knew my son had CMT, I immediately kind of said, like, you know what, if he ever tells me, Mum, I don't want to do sports day, I would pick him up and take him swimming instead. So it's about, like, you know, I think we don't want to force them to do things that they clearly can't do and they're just going to hurt them. But equally, I wouldn't pose kind of massive restrictions on him either and say, oh, you absolutely under no circumstances can you do X, Y, and Z, because some people with CMT do triathlons and they do them fine, and they, like, some people do manage to run. And I don't think that there's anything that I've read that suggests that you can categorically say that you must never do X, Y, and Z. It's just a matter of there are going to be some activities that are going to be more or less suitable than others. So if they can be a little bit more inventive with creating alternatives for him to do, like while they're running, if they can get him on a bike, or even if they have a gym area, then him and a friend could go and be on cross trainers, or they could be doing a bit of like squatting and step ups and things like that. They could do a couple of, like, a little circuit in the gym or something. You know, it's just about giving him options so he's still being active and fulfilling his sort of activity requirements, but he's doing it in a way that's suitable and accessible for him, rather than, I think, trying to fit square pegs into round holes and sort of forcing them to do the same as everyone else until they just get hurt. You know, so I think that what I try and do with children is I try and give them a little exercise program so that if they are in PE and they can't do what they're doing, then they've got their own little program of things that they could be getting on with anyway. But it really does help, I think, especially at that age, if they can have a friend or two do the same sort of thing with them. Because again, I think that it would be quite isolating otherwise to be kind of having to do something different on your own in the back of the hall somewhere while everyone else is on the field.
Yeah.
So I think it'll come down to, you know, I've been really lucky with my son's school in that I've been able to have regular meetings with them, and they've been really keen, and they've kind of been on the same page as me. But I think it might be worth, you know, whether there are ways that even the Muscular Dystrophy Association can help in terms of advocating to you a little bit and sort of helping, whether it's going to probably come down to having meetings with the school. And what I always maintained with my son's school is that I want him to be involved, but I wanted you to help him to do it, not to make him not do it, if that makes sense. So, like, I think he's only 5 at the minute. So, like, at their last sports day, what they did was that my son did all the same activities as everyone else, but they had a teacher run alongside him holding his hand so that he could do it. And they had a friend who would sort of run alongside him so he wasn't left till absolute last. So it's things like that. And I think it would be really small and sort of minimal effort changes that they could make that would just make the whole experience much more positive. And I think if they understood it better, then we might be able to address this attitude of them thinking like, oh, well, he just can't be bothered or is too lazy to do it. So I know that's what I suffered a lot with, is that I think they just wrote me off as only just one sporty. And it turns out I'm very sporty, but I needed to find the right sport. So it's that. And I think that, you know, if he has access to sports outside of school that might be more suitable, like swimming and cycling and rowing and horse riding, all that sort of, like, there's loads of things out there. then I think it helps to, it's not going to eliminate the problems that he's having, but I'm hoping that it will counteract some of the negative experiences that they get.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you. Are there other people on Zoom that will have a question? Okay, well then we're going to invite people in the room. If there's anybody who would like to ask a question, or indeed if they're comfortable sharing something they'd like to, you know, a thought that they have about all this or anything. Does anyone have questions for Rebekah?
Just a comment. Put the mic as close as you can.
Hi, Rebekah. I'm a retired physio and I was educated in England as well, and I have memories of hockey and netball. But netball, I was put in, the teacher was fairly good. She let me go in goal defence all the time, so I didn't have such a big distance to run. But she wrote in my final year report for school, and the physio school picked it up. Maureen does well considering her disability. So I was sent for a physical interview, and I did something I've never did before, and I've never done it since: climb a rope in the gym. I don't know how I managed to do it. It was pure mind over matter, because I'd never done it before and I've never attempted since. So that was just all. And thank you so much for the talk and everything. It was so interesting.
I'm really glad it was helpful. And well done on climbing a rope. I don't think I could do that. I thought, well, I've recently learned how to do pull-ups, but I'm not trying to pull myself all the way up a rope, to be honest. But it does go to show that I think the one thing is for me is that with CMT, is when you've had such consistent experiences when you're little of struggling with exercise, and it can be easy to get into a mindset where you think like, oh, I can't do things. When actually, if you can progress it sensibly and be willing to work at it consistently for a long period of time, you might be able to do more than you thought you could. That's certainly been the case for me.
Thanks very much, Rebekah and Maureen. Now there's another question here. Is it from Rosemary?
Hi, Rebekah. Thank you. That was so brilliant to hear you talk and about your experiences and everything with the school. My son is 12. My question is related to him, and he is CMT X1, but he's on the severe side of it. So at the minute he's growing again like a weed. And what we've noticed is every time he grows, the symptoms kind of seem to increase for him. And he's 5'4" now. I was 5'9". I think I've shrunk a little bit, but he had a little recent growing spurt. And out of that, in the mornings when he wakes up now, he's waking up, like as he says himself, little old lady, he's all stiff. The legs won't work right, the arms up to the elbows are kind of like, if he uses them, they're either like dead or sore. We're pretty active. Now, some of his endurance for running and stuff is a little bit more compromised than it was. Now, thankfully, I should say, Fiona, I was thinking of you, Fiona, there. The school has been brilliant with us and they're on the same page. So he's quite active. He does pee at his pace. So sometimes, if he's running, he'll run one lap, or they walk the daily mile. So sometimes he mightn't do the many amount of laps. He does it according to where he's at. Now, unfortunately, the growing spurts is bringing on a lot of pain. So they have started him on a pain management, but we're still we haven't found our place yet. So that's just ongoing. They have increased it recently. But I'm just wondering, have you any hints from the physio side to help either at the night time? We've been playing around with stretches and different things. Now in the morning, sometimes until the arms and legs kind of lose that stiffness, the shower really helps. We do the little stretching afterwards. Is there anything else we could be doing to help ease that symptom? Because it leaves the mobility in the morning, a bit questionable. And, we're there's different things happening now, like Zimmer frame, where you have to kind of support him to the toilet and stuff. Is there anything from the physio point of view to help this stage, or to relieve that tension that, in the arms and legs?
Yeah, so quite often what we find is that, especially when kids are having growth spurts, is that their bones grow really fast and then their muscles have a hard time keeping up. I think the stretches become really important then. So especially, but with stretches, I think the main thing with them is that people are quite good at counting to 10 and then thinking, tick, done. Really, it's better if you could do less number of stretches, but hold them for longer. So like 20 or 30 seconds each. In terms of things like pain and stiffness, I know a lot of people get on really well with like heat pads and like hot water bottles, or like you can get like little mini electric blanket type things. And I know that when my feet are hurting, that often helps. Because what normally is easier is to do stretches when your muscles are already warm. It's sometimes hard to get going when they're a bit stiff first thing. But otherwise it can even be things like sometimes squeezing a sponge in a bowl of warm water can be quite a nice way to get the hands and fingers going. And then the wrists then, and it's going to be a matter then of sort of gradually working his way through his upper limbs, I suppose, until they settle down a bit. Hopefully it will get a little bit better once he stops growing so fast. But I think that the main things to, if I was going to say to pick a couple of stretches, I would definitely focus on things like the wrist flexors. So it's going to be things like getting your arm out this way and sort of stretching out the fingers, because what tends to happen is that people start to do this. So we want to try and sort of stretch out the fingers like that instead, and to put the wrist sort of backwards. I've got the opposite problem. I'm a bit hypermobile. I'm a bit bendy. But stretching out the forearms, I think, really helps. And the other thing as well to keep an eye on, we've been making sure that he's stretching his calves regularly. Because the one thing that really gets in people's way is if they've got drop foot as well, when your calves get really tight and you start to lose range in the ankle, it gets even harder to pick your foot up properly. So I think stretching out your calves really helps. And I actually think that as well as the stretching, the trouble is with growing really fast is that then you're having to learn to kind of use your body a little bit all over again, and it can affect things like proprioception, which is like your own sort of idea of where your body is in space. So I think actually doing a little bit of strength work can really help. And I know that, for example, when I was growing up, they were obsessed with the fact that my hamstrings were tight. So I spent, I don't even know how many hours a day doing hamstring stretches and didn't really get anywhere. But in the end, what improved my hamstring flexibility wasn't stretching them, it was getting them a bit stronger. And it was when I started doing things like Romanian deadlifts and hip hinging kind of movements, then actually, especially strengthening exercises where you're lengthening the muscle at the same time, we call them eccentric exercises, can be really effective for increasing the range of movement. So I think I usually now, rather than worry too much about getting people with CMT to do loads of hamstring stretches, I try and teach them how to hip hinge instead. And there's a few different videos on YouTube about like doing RDLs, they're called, with like a dowel, so like a stick or like a mop handle or something behind your back, and you have the stick kind of touching the back of your head, the middle of your back and the bottom of your spine, and then it's learning to bend from your hips rather than your spine, and that really helps to get your hamstrings going, because a lot of the time I think that it's the fact that you don't have much control over it that then means that your body feels the need to kind of hang on for dear life, whereas if you can get a little bit stronger, then that need lessens and then you find that you have more range. So it can be a bit of a combination of the two. I think people are normally quite on board with stretching, but I actually think that there's a role for strengthening as well. And I think especially as he's growing and learning to move his body differently, if he can develop good movement patterns, then that goes a long way, you know. I think in schools, if they focus less on running and more on teaching people how to squat and deadlift, we'd have people moving better and probably having less trouble.
Thank you, that's a great help. And it's funny you say about the hamstrings, because there's not a focus on his hamstrings, but he does have a really tight Achilles tendon as well, obviously, because he is severe drop foot with each foot, with the 2 feet. But yeah, there is a lot of emphasis on his hamstrings. But we look at the strength, because he's like a fish in water. He's so brilliant at swimming. And despite, being the slowest, as he says, Mammy, I'm just the slowest. No one wants to pick him on any team because he's so slow. But he's learned to live with that. But yet in the water in his class, he's the fastest. Swimming comes so naturally to him. But it's just at the minute, and it's like what you said about his body seizes up now because he's actually afraid as well. and it's kind of like he can't trust it anymore in the morning. So we're trying to work through that too. Yeah, but that was a great help. I'll look into that. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Rosemary and Rebekah. Are there any other questions from the group here in the room?
Hi Rebekah, it's Dipna Mulroy here, Research Officer at Muscular Dystrophy Ireland. I just want to say thank you for a wonderful presentation. I really liked the part about preparing for your physio appointment, because I've worked with people who have CMT, and I think just those kind of real practical, like go in, how is it impacting you? What are the goals you want to work on? That was just some really good tips to help people get the most out of their appointment. So thank you for that. There is a question on the chat, and I'm just going to read it out. It was, how delayed is delayed when it comes to DOMS? So this is actually from Catherine. She said, it's generally day 2 or 3 for me when the aches kick in. Is that, could you speak to that?
Really tough. And in fact, people without CMT get DOMS as well. But I just think that probably because we're often starting from a lower level, I think that people find it more of a problem. And the other thing is that probably if you don't have CMT, then having achy legs is less of a problem than if you do already have some trouble, and then you've got the added burden of DOMS on top of that. Usually it's between 24 and 48 hours. So what you'll typically find is that you might exercise on the Monday, you might feel it a little bit on the Tuesday, but it's usually the Wednesday and the Thursday then that it'll really kick in, and you'll feel like you've been hit by a bus probably. And it feels like your muscles can't move at all, and it feels really stiff. The problem is though, is that if you sort of sit still too long, it feels worse. And then when you try and get going again, it feels absolutely terrible. If you've ever been to the gym and then sat still at a desk all day, then trying to get up again is horrible. The best thing for it is actually to get gently moving again. And it's probably the last thing that you want to do. But if you can pick something light that just sort of gets you going a little bit again. So it might be sitting on a bike, it might be a cross train, it might be going for a walk. Usually you'll find that by the time the blood starts flowing around your body again and it starts recycling all those waste products, and it loosens everything up, and then you'll usually finish it feeling better than when you started. But if you wait until it completely settles down before you do anything again, then you never really get past that initial phase where it just really hurts. So it's the only way out of it is through it, unfortunately, with that one. But it's just being reassured that that's normal and it's not harmful in any way.
I'm conscious of that there may be more people in the room who have questions, and I'd really like us to have that opportunity. I wondered, Dipna, would you be okay if we held off on the presentation on Muscular Dystrophy Ireland until after lunch, like later on in the afternoon, so that people have the opportunity to ask Rebekah questions now? Is that okay in terms of scheduling? Great, so we just to encourage you to ask questions or comments. So Vincent.
Does Rebekah jog? Or is it possible to jog with CMT?
Possible. I know of people who do. For me, no. I can look like I'm jogging, but I don't really have any strength through my calf muscles. So if I stand up, I can't come onto my toes at all. So what tends to happen then is I can look like I'm running, but I'm mainly using my quads and sort of pushing off my knees. And I can't do that for very long before something starts to really hurt, and it'll either be my knees or it'll be my tendons and my ankles. So it's like I could, if I had to run across a road, I probably could look like I was doing it. And that's why sometimes I think people look at me and they forget that I've got CMT, because I can look normal a lot of the time, or at least it doesn't show how much harder I have to work to achieve the same things. But yeah, I tried many times over the years to be a runner. I think in another life, if I hadn't had CMT, I'd have probably done ultramarathons. My mum did Ironman. I think we just got the endurance gene in the family, but unfortunately I've also got the CMT gene, which doesn't match up very greatly with that. So no, I don't really run. I know some people who do, but personally I find it's not worth the injuries for me, and I think I would rather focus on things that don't hurt me so much.
Thank you, Rebekah. Vincent? Thank you, Rebekah and Vincent. Are there more questions in the room? Please don't be shy. Every question is valid. There's one online that Dipna will share.
Rebekah, this is from Sean. He just says, thank you. I have a 15-year-old daughter with CMT1A. She has recently discovered that she also has hip dysplasia and will be having a PAO operation later in the year. Would you have any advice for the recovery physio, please? Thank you.
Okay, so my best advice for this, and indeed any other surgery really, is the stronger you are going in, the easier a time you're going to have coming out. So even though she's not having the operation until later in the year, it's never time wasted if she starts now trying to build up the strength and the muscles around her hips and legs and core. You know, surgery takes a lot out of you, and it's a long road to recovery, and she's going to be having lots of physio afterwards. But I think sometimes what hospitals could do better is actually have a period of time beforehand where you can kind of do, they'll call it prehab. But even if you can't get that done formally through the hospital, then it's worth seeing if you can find a physio or a personal trainer near you who'd be able to adapt things so that she could still exercise in the meantime. Because the trouble is that if you go into surgery week and then you have the operation and then you've got a long way to go then afterwards. Whereas if she can start doing some of the exercises before she actually even goes in, she'll probably have a much easier time coming out.
Thank you, Rebekah. Vincent has another question. So,
Sorry, Rebekah.
we just wait for to give you the back and yes now.
Sorry, Rebekah. Tell me, vitamins or any foods? Is there any foods that we could eat or vitamins that we could take that would help?
As far as I know, there's nothing that's been sort of proven yet. I know they did trials on vitamin C, but I don't think it really came to anything in the end. I think the best thing you can possibly do is just to have a healthy, varied, balanced diet. You know, and I think that with any condition that's muscle wasting, I think having a reasonable protein intake for me would always be important. I know in the UK anyway, we advise everyone to be taking vitamin D because we just don't get enough sunlight. I imagine it's similar where you are as well. But I think otherwise, the advice generally is just to have a healthy, balanced diet. Nothing specific that makes it better or worse.
Great, thank you. Anybody else have a question? I have a question, if that's okay. Rebekah, I was wondering, would you like to share your observations on the mental health benefits of physical activity? What would you say to us?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, as someone who, when I first got diagnosed with CMT, entered such a state of panic, I'd be like, oh no, what am I going to be able to do? You know, like, am I going to be, you know, am I going to be really limited? Am I going to be able to be a physio forever? And like, so much of it feels out of your control. And in reality, so much of it is out of your control. You know, like these nerves are going to degenerate at the rate that they want to degenerate. And there's nothing you can really do to speed it up or slow it down, which can feel like a negative thing. But also I think it could be a positive, you know, like there's nothing I can do that's going to make it worse. So you might as well be stronger and fitter to deal with it better. And I think that it's very hard to be worried about whether you're going to get up and down the stairs if you can deadlift twice your weight. Then, so I think that's how it all started off with me initially. It made me feel like I had a bit of control over the situation. It helped me feel like there was something I could do about it. And even now I know that, you know, realistically, in the future, there are going to be more and more things that I'm going to find difficult. But I think at least whatever position I get to, it won't be because I wasn't fit enough to start with, and it won't be because I didn't try, and it won't be because of anything other than the condition that I can't do anything about. And I think that you'll always be in a better position if you are exercising in some way than if you weren't. So I think you could have the CMT muscle wasting, or you could have CMT muscle wasting on top of normal muscle wasting just from not doing anything. So I think, you know, from even just the endorphins is positive, but also just feeling like there's something you can do about it. When you're constantly told like, oh, it's incurable, go and live with it. I think, geez, like what an uninspiring way to like give advice to patients, to tell them to live with it and get over and to deal with it. Basically, there's plenty you can do, and you know, and I think that even for the things that you can't do, it doesn't seem so bad. Like I think I've managed to change my mindset around adaptations and things over time as well. I think initially I was very, very worried about CMT, and like I thought like, oh well, I need to stay out of splint as long as I possibly can. Whereas now I think like, oh, well, actually this splints improved my life and enabled me to do other things. So it's just about broadening your kind of view on it, really.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Rebekah. plenty food for thought there for us all. Thank you so much for your very generous giving of your time and expertise and experience. We really appreciate it. I think you may be able to stay on for some of this event, I'm not sure. If you can, that's great. And yes, and we will be back in touch as well, but thank you so much. So we will now go on now to warmly welcome Maureen Bradley, who is a member of Muscular Dystrophy Ireland for many years and is living with CMT, and she's going to speak with us about living well with CMT. And Maureen, physio is a big theme today because Maureen is a retired physiotherapist, as you would have mentioned earlier. So it's lovely to kind of bring this theme together here as well.
Okay. Hi, my name is Maureen Bradley. I'm a retired physiotherapist and I've been living with CMT for the past 25 years. Well, actually longer. I was only diagnosed 25 years ago, but knew there was a problem when I was a child. But because I was born in the early 50s, 1950s, anyone that had a problem, you were classed as post-polio. And that's what I lived with till I was 48. And then finally diagnosed. But luckily enough, with my training as physio, I managed to look after myself fairly well. And also, I think that I'm one of the luckier ones. I don't seem to have as many problems as other people, thankfully. Right, as I said, I was diagnosed in 1998, and I had loads of surgery on my feet. The first when I was 11, because I had very flat feet. Then they developed into what they call locally claw feet, pes cavus. So at the age of 11, they did fascia release to the soles of my feet. And that was 6 weeks in plaster. That was fun. That was the first time. Then when I was 15, on the left foot, I had to have a triple arthrodesis done to the joints of the foot. That wasn't so fun. That wasn't so much fun. And then at 18, I had a big toe straightened because it had curled in under the other toes, not a bunion. It was curled in under the other toes, and it kept erupting up into like an ulcer. So they had to take, to straighten it. Then at 33, I had on the same foot the next two toes straightened because they were curled under, and every time I walked on the nail, it was painful. But it got to the stage that when I lifted it up, it was even more painful. So I said, enough is enough. So I went and got that sorted out. Then I was diagnosed, and then I ended up, when I was 63, with a spontaneous fracture, the only fracture I had, thank God, in the bones of my foot. And as I was told, it's like a footballer's fracture. And when they went in to pin that, they realised that I had severe arthritis on the outside of the foot. So I had an arthrodesis done on that side. So now I cannot find it very hard to walk on pebbles or grass, but that's another story. So that's all the surgery, thank God. The next surgery was to do with old age, and that was a hip replacement, done. Just before COVID, so I don't put that down to anything else. Now, I wrote down a few headings, so just to help keep me on track. Right, the first thing to do about keeping well is general advice. Watch your weight. Then exercise. The way I exercise is I try to get in 4 times, 4 days a week. I used to go for long walks. Then the next day I would be tripping up, falling over everything. So I changed it to 2 small sessions a day, 1 after breakfast and 1 mid-afternoon. And the reason it's 4 days because I have other activities on the go as well. For the upper part of the body, I use the dumbbells and TheraBand. TheraBand is very good, but be careful of what colour you get because they're all different strengths. And one for the hand, this is what we used to use at work because when I was trained in the 70s, there wasn't that much fancy equipment around. So we used to use for the hands as well, clothes pegs, get different strength clothes pegs for the fingers. I stretch a lot, I always have done. In my good days, I was able to reach down and touch the ground and touch with the full palm of my hand on the ground. And that's why I like to keep it that way, supple. We were trained as students to keep our hands, like Rebekah was saying, keeping our hands supple. We had, you know, different exercises that we did. And so that's generally with the exercises. With digestion, your digestive system can be sluggish. It can run in families that you're sluggish, you're more prone to constipation. Also, if you're not exercising properly, the constipation can happen a lot easier. So eat good high fibre diet to reduce it. Drink loads of fluid. If you take fibre, you need the water for the fibre to expand, bulk up and go through the system. And if you can keep yourself constipation free, you'll have less problems in your life as you get older. Because if you suffer from constipation a lot, you can end up with piles. Not very nice, very painful, I believe. I've been lucky enough. And also, as you get older, pelvic floor problems, that you can end up with getting leakage of the bladder because constipation can damage the pelvic floor, it weakens it. Now, the other big thing that annoyed me over the years was cramp, stroke, spasm. Trying to distinguish between the two. I'm not sure if it's they both mean the same thing, but they mean the same pain anyway. One time when you heard about cramps, it was usually in the back of your leg, and people used to say, jump out of bed and put the foot on the floor and stretch. I'm lucky enough didn't get too many in the feet. The spasms I got were in my hand. My left side was always the worst side. And you could be treating a patient, the next thing's the fingers would go in, and you'd have to pull back and literally pull each finger out, sometimes one by one. That's not happening as much lately, and I don't know, is it the fact that I'm not using hands as much, the fact that I'm not working, you know, full time anymore. The other one that annoys me is my thighs, in the front of the thigh and the back of the thigh. Now, one is okay. If you've got it on the back of the thigh and you try and stretch the leg out, straighten the knee, the next thing, the one on the top goes. And then when you try to stretch that one, it's the back of the thigh again. And it can be very annoying, and it can last up to 10 or 15 minutes before I can get to the stage that I can stand up. So then what I found is what triggers the cramp, the spasms, is if I sit for too long on a couch. I had to change my couch because the couch was too low, so I changed it. And if you sit for too long and then you move suddenly, that's when the cramps start. So I started now, I don't watch a full film. I watch films, I tape them, then watch them. I don't watch anything, you know, straight off, because some of the films can be too long. So at least I can stop them halfway and go for a walk, go and get a drink in the kitchen or whatever I need. Also, I was having problems with my back at one stage, and what I used to do was I'd sit on the edge of the chair watching the telly, always watch one that has ads, and every time the ads were on, check what position you were in, because you'll, without thinking, slouch back into the chair. So you get up and you can train yourself to sit straighter by, you know, using the ads, and I found that very helpful. My biggest on about the sitting still, I was mentioning it earlier on. When I was out socialising, it was dinner dances, weddings. There was a lot of that. And I found if I sat for the full meal at the dinner dance and someone had come over to ask you to dance, you couldn't get up off the chair. So I got into the habit of, after the main course, checking who was sitting with me, knew what dessert I'd ordered, and I'd go for a walk around the hotel and come back and sit down. The same at a wedding. And the same at home, I just get up and move around. Like any time we had a break here, I was up and gone for a little walk. My main problem all my life has been my feet. Because I grew up with it before I knew what was wrong, I'd adjusted to it and I didn't have a label. All right, I had post-polio, but as a child, what does that mean? Well, that's what I was told I had. What does that mean? It's just a name that goes over your head and you just ignore it and keep going. Mum, fair play to her, knew there was something wrong, but she accepted that at the polio diagnosis, I was sent Irish dancing to strengthen my legs. I was okay. I like dancing, still do. And for the hands, even of an English accent, both my parents are Irish. You get 6 weeks school holiday in England for the summer. We were put on the first plane over a boat and we worked on the grandparents' farm for the 6 weeks. So from a very early age, I was taught how to milk cows by hand. Now, don't put me with a milking parlour. I wouldn't know how to use the machine, but I can still milk by hand. And it did strengthen the hands up a bit. But for the feet, its sensation is one of the biggest problems. Wobbly ankles. I remember in the hospital, I remember the first talk I had to give. It was on health and safety, because I was a health and safety rep at the time. And there was wires across the floor. And I walked in, stood on the wire, the wobbly ankle, and down I went. And I got up and I said, that's how you don't do things. And that's why you need wires put out of the way. So it worked to my advantage. But for feet, wear good fitting shoes and socks. Socks can be if socks are too small and tight, they're a bigger problem than tight shoes or shoes that are not the right size. Also with socks, because of the sensation in your feet is off, follow the diabetic advice for people with diabetes. Turn your socks inside out so that then the ridge of the seam is on the outside of the sock and it's not putting pressure on your feet. All right? Get a good chiropodist. I found my hips were always a problem I couldn't sit cross-legged. So it was very hard to get at, as I got older, to get at the soles of the feet, to have a look at them and to look after them myself, or the toenails. So I've been going to a good chiropodist for a long time. And the advice she'll give you as well is keep your feet moisturised, the socks, and also don't moisturise between your toes. I find that with the way my muscles are, my toes are tightly packed together, even though I have a loose fitting shoe. So what I do is I use surgical spirits that you buy in the chemist, not the white spirits that you get in the hardware. The white spirit is for cleaning your paintbrushes. The surgical spirit in the chemist, and I wipe between my toes with them several times a week. Also, if you do get an attack of athlete's foot, what I use is the eye makeup removers. I cut them into 4 and then I put them between the toes, and it keeps the toes from rubbing off each other and it's not sore. It's only something simple, but I find it helps a lot. I check my feet once a week with a mirror because of the sensation. My sensation, it comes and goes, and I can't work out what aggravates what I do, how it helps. But with the lower sensation, by the time I feel things on the foot, the damage is done. So I get a mirror and look at it, and you know, I prop up the mirror and put the feet around. And if you do have a problem with your foot, take a photograph of it with the mobile, and then take another one a couple of weeks later, and then at least you've got a history of it, that if you do have to go to someone, a doctor, about it, at least you can say, this is how it started, this is the way it's now. So so at least they'll believe you. Sometimes I don't know whether they're too busy or what, but sometimes I find the doctors are not don't listen, or they don't understand what we're trying to say. So that's that. Now, I've jumped a bit. Okay. Circulation in the feet is very important. If you're sitting down for a lot, which if you have a mobility problem, you will do, even though you don't intend to, it will happen. Keep your feet warm, especially in the winter, because your circulation gets sluggish, you get swelling of the feet. Also, because the veins are not, the arteries and veins are not working as efficiently, you can get leg ulcers. And if you get a leg ulcer, it is very, very hard to heal. So you keep your feet warm. If you're sitting for a long time, maybe put them up on a stool for a while to help the circulation. And since all the surgery on my feet, I have a certain stiffness in other joints that are not operated on, but they've got stiff because of the way I walk. So I use a tennis ball or a dog's, you know, the dog has the little, you know, the round rubbery ones. And I put it under the soles, under the ball of the feet, and I roll my feet round. Because all your joints have what we call movement and accessory movement. Movement is what muscles do. Like, that's up, that's down, out and in. But there's also a little bit, if you relax your hand and move, there's a little bit of extra movement there. There's no muscle that does it, but you have to have it for the other muscles to work efficiently. And if you lose it, it's hard on the other muscles. So that's what I found for the ball. You put it on the floor while you're watching the telly. And I find that a great help. Hands. Hands are like the feet in the sense you have to keep them warm. Keep them moisturised. The reason I'm saying moisturising the hand as well, for the look of them, but also I find if you keep them moisturised, the sensation is better. It improves slightly. Also, get your mittens. You know the ones with the fingers off, as I call them, the Scrooge mittens, you know, from Charles Dickens, and you wear them, and it keeps the blood warm to here. People that have, I can't even think of the name of it now, they have circulation problems. They wear gloves all the time. But if you wear them to here, it keeps the blood warm to here. So it only has to go up and down before it gets into the heat again. And that means you can still use your computer, use your phone when you're out, if you want to. Though I wouldn't be using my phone much when I'm out. I'm using my eyes to watch the ground so I don't trip up. Heat and cold as a treatment. Heat is good for an ache, a painful muscle. But if you have an injury, a sprain, ice helps. But then because of the sensation in the hands, you have to be careful with the ice. So I say put a wet flannel on your hand and then put the ice pack on top. Do not leave it on longer than 10 minutes. 7 is the usual. But every now and again, lift it up and check the condition of the skin, that it's not getting, a red in a spot. They're just simple things, but they're, easy to do. I didn't realise I had a problem with hot water till my niece came to stay with me during COVID, because I had the hip replacement. I got out of hospital the day the lockdown was announced, so she came and stayed with me because there was a few things I couldn't do. She couldn't get over how hot I have the water in the basin for washing the dishes. I don't have a dishwasher because I live on my own, no need for one. And she couldn't get over it. And it wasn't till then I started realising maybe I do have it a bit hot. So I'm more wary of that. Also, I won't go up on a step ladder in the house anymore. I used to do all my own DIY. I don't do it anymore. I do on the floor all right, but I won't go up on a step ladder. I've changed a lot as I've got older. At one time I used to love dancing. 20 years ago, I ended up on chemo. I lost the use of everything. I ended up in a wheelchair. I had no eye control, vision control, no bladder or bowel control. Thank God it came back. The consultant at the time had never heard of CMT, the oncologist, and he contacted his colleagues in America, got as much information as he could, and then laid out the problems, the risks and everything in front of me. So it took me about 18 months to get back. I lost a little residual power, but I won't dance now unless I'm dancing with one of my nephews, you know, when you're at weddings and that. Because I feel if I'm going to fall, if I'm dancing with someone the same age as me, I could pull them down, and I don't know which of us would end up the worst. Whoever landed on the bottom, underneath. So I don't do that. My main exercise is walking. I don't like swimming. I had an incident when I was a child, and I do not like water since. But I've learned to swim on my back, so the water's not near my face. I can swim on my back. I've joined the Active Retirement Association, and they do a lot of activities, which is good because I can do most of them. The one I've picked up is short bowls, short mat bowls, you know, like the 3 balls of the jack. But my problem was getting down and getting up because balance is not good. So I rooted in my garage and I found a kneeler, a plastic one out of Woodies years ago, that you can use it as a seat, and then you can turn it up the other way with the kneeler and 2 handles. So I bring that with me to the bowls. And I found out my bowling has improved. I can actually get it near to the jack now. Because what was happening is you'd aim, and then just as you were ready to go, your balance would go, and it could go anywhere. So that was my way around that. Right, I think that's enough to keep you, what's the word, mulling over, and thank you.
Maureen, thank you so much for a wealth of experience and tips and practical guidance. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. I hope we can all agree that it was a fantastic contribution, and really thank you for your time, for doing all of that and contributing it to us. Thank you very much. Now again, we'd like to invite people to ask Maureen questions. So first of all, we'd like to just see, would anybody online like to ask Maureen a question? It doesn't appear so. How about anybody in the room? Anybody have a question for Maureen, or what strikes you? Anything at all you'd like to share or ask in relation to Maureen's fantastic talk? There's something on the screen now. Yeah. Oh. I can read that out. Oh, here. It's from Catherine Forsey from CMT Association. Thanks, Maureen. That was really interesting. Right. So there you are. Yeah. I'd like to ask a little bit more about, you mentioned when you had the cancer treatment, how it impacted on you. Is it the particular chemotherapy that doesn't work well with CMT? Sorry.
Right, can I go now? I can go, yeah. I contacted, when I was first diagnosed, because there was nothing in Ireland at the time, I contacted the association in England and also Australia and America online. And they gave out a list of drugs that can affect Charcot-Marie-Tooth. And the 2 drugs, it was breast cancer I had, and the 2 drugs that the consultant wanted to put me on were 2 that were on the list, top of the list. And I showed had my fears with them. I was lucky enough, he was in the hospital I worked in, so I had worked with him, because my speciality at that time was, believe it or not, manual lymph drainage for cancer patients. That was where I had branched into. And so he knew we worked well together. And he hadn't heard of Charcot-Marie-Tooth, but the first I saw him, my file was like that. I went back to him a week later he gave me a week, you know, for all the healing and everything. And I went back. My file was that height. He'd got to all his colleagues in America that he'd worked with and got all the information. And he said, the risks are, and he said, I don't know how much damage is going to be left. He said, you could end up in a wheelchair, you could end up in it for life. He said, I don't know. He says, it's your choice now that you either that you take it or die within 2 years because of the cancer. And he said, that's yours. So a bit of a chance for me, so I took the risk. And I said, I'll take the treatment. But I'm a sensitive sort of person anyway. All I have to do is eat oranges and I come up in hives. I love salmon, but I had to give it up. Tingling around the lips. So it's just, I know there's certain things that aggravate my body, so I just stay away from them. But the symptoms I got was first of all, lack of sensation. I had no feeling from the elbows or the knees down, or funny around my lips. There was nothing, I could feel nothing. I lost my sense of taste, smell was okay. It went too acute and it stayed acute. That means I can nearly smell grass grow, that sort of thing. Then the power started going in the muscles. So I was gradually going onto crutches. Then I ended up in a wheelchair. The hair left, all my nails, fingernails and toenails went. They all came back. But I finished the chemo, I'd say the end of September, no, the end of August. And I didn't get feeling back in my feet, beginning to come back the end of November, because I was up in St. Luke's as an inpatient because I couldn't get on and off the bus to travel. And every morning I put my feet out of the bed and put them on the tile floor to see if I could feel it. And that was how I knew. The staff knew how I was getting on because I used to go for a walk. I started doing exercises and going for a walk to the door and back every hour on the hour. And that's why I kept my treatment up, you know, once I had the treatment done, to get my, sensation back, my power back. There was one other drug that affects me as well, and that's how I got diagnosed. It's an anaesthetic, succinylcholine, all right? I'd had it a couple of times, and when I got back to the bed, I wouldn't be able to lift my head off the bed. The pain, you know, the pain in my neck. And so, past no remarks at the time. Then I was in having another test done, for, a routine test, and I had to have the succinylcholine for that as well. But that time, the next day, I couldn't get out of the bed. When I went home, it was a day case. I rang the anaesthetist who I'd worked with, lucky enough, in the hospital, and she says, can you get up here? I says, I can get someone to drive me up. And that's when I was sent. She says, I think you've got some sort of a neurological deficit somewhere. So I was sent up then to Orla Hardiman and diagnosed then. And what happens with the succinylcholine, there's two types of anaesthetic. One totally relaxes the muscles. The succinylcholine brings it down to a level that the muscles are flickering all the time. And so when you eventually wake up, the muscles are so tired because they've been flickering the whole time. From what I gather, I don't know if that is even being used anymore, because I know anaesthetics have improved a lot in the last 10 or 15 years, so I don't know if it's been used anymore. So maybe that's something that someone can look into. Yeah. So, but I nearly lost the trend of the question.
Thank you very much for elaborating on that, just to enhance our understanding of that aspect of it all. Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time. Again, thanks so much, Maureen. I'm conscious of time. We're now going to have Dimpna give us an outline of the services that Muscular Dystrophy offers, and very much also encouraging you all to know that we are here for you. We're here for you and your families. And that if you have any questions following this, please do contact your family support worker if you have one, or indeed there is also a query little thing on the website that you can also key in a query if you have as well, or indeed if you want to go straight online and become a member. So please do contact us. We are here, and we will do our best to link you in with a query, an answer to a query, or to a service that you're interested in. So thank you very much. I'm very conscious of time. It's been so packed with really rich and interesting inputs and discussion. Thank you all so much. I'm conscious of time that we are gone 3 o'clock, but I would like us to close with a very short closing round just so that everybody can come back in again. So I'd like to invite people to say just one or two words about what you are taking away from the day. And I'd like us to start again with the people online. So if we can in turn invite people online just to say one or two words of what are you taking away with you from today, and to thank you all for being here on both virtually and in the room, and for your participation and effort to be here and your interest. Thanks, really great to meet you. So if you'd like to start online, thank you.
Hi, thanks for unmuting me. I'll take that as an invitation to go first. I'm just taking, it's great to meet with you all. I've not been in Marvel too long, so it's great to connect with those working on CMT in Ireland, to say hello, put faces to names, and hopefully we can connect on any collaborative projects around CMT. CMTA works quite closely with CMT UK, so it's great to hear what you guys are up to. It's really similar to the work we're doing, so hopefully there's lots of synergies where we can connect and support each other. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. So now we have
Alan. I'd just like to echo that. I'm really grateful that you invited us, and it's really nice that you organized this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolina.
Alan, maybe?
Now we're inviting Alan to say a word.
Thanks. I think this is great. I think it's the first opportunity I've had to listen to other people's stories, and just understand what it's going to be like. So it's kind of a bit of an eye opener for me, with my little lad going forward. So I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan. Just again, thank you all so much. It's really lovely to meet you all and to meet you online. And please do stay in contact. And I'll come back when we're finished, just to a few little tidy up things at the end. Over to Dimpna.
Yeah, I just want to really reiterate, no, it's been really lovely to meet people online and people here in person as well today. Just, yeah, I think for me, taking away, it's just been lovely to hear the stories and the information that's been shared, and just to really meet you in person. So yeah, thank you. Do you want to go ahead, Mary?
Thank you very much for this. Has been a very informative day for me. Up until 12 months ago, I didn't know such a thing as CMT, but I think I've learned a lot, and it's been a kind of, like Alan said there, a kind of an eye-opener for me.
Great, Mary. Thank you very much.
Rosemary. Yeah, it was a wonderful day. Thank you so much for hosting it and all the great speakers. It kind of made me feel that you're not so, after getting the diagnosis last November for myself and my son, you're not so isolated. It's kind of like you feel connected now a little bit to everyone, and it's, even though you do it on social media, it's not the same. Like being in a room today and listening, especially to Rebekah and Maureen, it just that kind of gives you that sense that, yeah, you can do this. And I don't feel so isolated now in a lot of respects. And it was great to bring my friend as well, that you had someone outside of your little isolation bubble. So thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. Over to Sarah.
Thank you. I think it's great that muscular dystrophy are, that CMT are under the umbrella, and the support, because it wasn't really there before, and you'd feel isolated in Ireland, that you'd have nobody to talk to or nowhere to go for support. And now you have the Muscular Dystrophy Association, which is great, and there's so much to offer, like counselling and, you know, coffee mornings, all the things that they mentioned. It's great. So you can always pick up the phone and look for help if you need it now. It's great. It's a big thing for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
So thanks for all the speakers. And every story that was told, it was like as if they had read my story. Everything hit the points, everything between the walking, the falling. I had a bad fall 2 years ago and I'm terrified of walking now. And my confidence is completely shattered. So hopefully, please God, things will improve. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anyway, I'm glad to be here today, and also it's good for having the condition over, you know, for as long as I have, that it's nice to know that everything is moving forward in every direction, and I think that's lovely to hear about. So, thank you.
Thank you, Maureen.
I'm also very glad to be here, and I thank MD Ireland for inviting us, and it was great to listen to all your stories and to talk to you all over the break. And yeah, I hope you reach out for any question you might have, or to us or to Limpna and Maeve. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabiana.
Well, I learned a lot today about it, which I did not know beforehand. And thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you.
Learned a lot today. Thanks to Muscular Dystrophy Ireland for having us. It was a good day out, and it's nice to know that there's more research being done on the condition. Whereas before, when I found out about it, we didn't know enough at the time. We're just going back nearly 7 years, so it's just nice to know more information now.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. And did Sinead, did you want to say?
I just want to reiterate that you're not on your own. We are here. We're a big organisation. We've support workers all across the country. So please pick up the phone and reach out. No questions too big, no questions too small. We're here. Use us. You're not on your own.
And Karen, would you like to say a word there?
I was so busy doing the microphone, I completely forgot to introduce myself. So I'm Karen. I'm a youth worker and a family support worker. And it was so nice I'm new in the company, so it's nice to kind of meet a few people, and if ever you have any questions or anything, you can always call, and hopefully all the services that Dimpna has explained, we'll be able to help you set up with them. So yeah, hope anyway you get a good peer connection out of this as well.
Thank Karen. So just to finish up, just to say a few things again, thank you to our speakers, fantastic speakers, to everybody for sharing and participating either by speaking or listening, and to encourage people to connect in with us. We certainly very much appreciated linking in with you. So thanks everybody, and I wish you a lovely evening wherever you are. Great stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.